I wish I could go back to that officer back in 1997 and say, listen, kid, there's so much more out there.
That was Doug Kazensky. He's a senior solutions engineer for Vector Solutions. And he's also a retired patrol sergeant and spent a lot of his time as a trainer and in the training space within law enforcement. He was an airman, got out of the Air Force, and went to Longview, Washington Police Department, where he served as a patrol officer, an SRO, and did time as a detective specializing in fraud and computer crimes. Now, in this conversation, as you just heard, we talk about a moment in our current lives where we look back and say, I wish I could go back to that guy back then and just give this little piece of advice. But I think the bigger part of this conversation, as you'll see, is about how there's going to come a time in 2036 or 2046 when we say, I wish I could go back to me in 2026 and give this piece of advice. I think as trainers, we constantly sit on the edge of what's relevant and salient and real to us at this time, but it's also a prediction into the future and where we're going, where we need to be at some other point. And I think the writing's on the wall. There's a lot of stuff happening. And Doug kind of alludes to some of that in this conversation. Super excited for you to listen. And I can't wait to check in with you at the end.
Yeah. And I think that, like I said, I was kind of thinking back of my early on in my career, right? There I was, 23 years old, 1997, passed the academy, and I just thought I was hot stuff, right? I'm like, I get it. It's the pinnacle, right? I done it. Great. It's perfect. I'm so awesome, right? And I just, I obviously I have the benefit of 30 years now perspective, right? I was a cop I was a security police in the Air Force for 4 years, and I got out and got into the civilian side of thing, and I thought, I got this, right? And I realize now that I didn't know crap. Not only did I not know that, but I was ignorant to the idea, the concept of being a student of your craft, right? I thought I was there, right? And I went to training when I was told to go to training. We would do in-service training, and that's when I would do training. And it never occurred to me that I could take that on my own and make myself better on my own. I sort of waited for my department to send me to training and say, hey, you should go to this, or we're going to send you this. I'll be like, oh, okay. And so I didn't read, the publications, American Police Beat. I didn't read any of that stuff. I got time for that stuff, right? I'm here. And it wasn't, and then even then the opportunity to become an instructor. And I was like, yeah, I want to be a firearms instructor because I see those guys back there coking and joking while we're picking up brass. They're not doing anything, right? Yeah, I want to do that job. So even originally getting into the instructing game, I did it for the wrong reasons because I want to get out of work and watch everyone else struggle, right? It wasn't until I actually became an instructor and then I had officers like coming to me, what do you think? Like, how can you help me? Like, I'm on the struggle bus here. And I'd be like, I don't know, do this, right? And I thought, that's poor, right? And then by some miracle, I get promoted to sergeant. And then that's when it started to hit me. Now, it's not just about me, right? Now, I have the lives of these 5, 6, 8 officers that are looking at me. Now I started to get like, hey, I should probably read some stuff. Like I should probably be up on, and in Washington, my home state, Washington, they had at the time they would do these great like monthly legal updates that they would, these little digests that they would publish, that the AG's office would publish. And I didn't read that stuff, right? But then I'm like, I should probably read that stuff, right? And because there'd be case law updates, like, hey, we can't do this anymore, that kind of stuff. So I started to get a hint of that, of the responsibility and how important it was to become a student of your craft, to become like to really study your craft, whatever craft it is. In my case, law enforcement. But to be a student of your craft, how important it is. Like if you really want to excel, you can't just wait for your department to do it for you, right? And I started to get that, and then I took over training, right? So they had they had a sergeant in there, and it was not let's just say retired and active duty sort of situation. It was just sort of like, went for a couple of years, and they're like, listen, we're going to move you into here. And I remember, being at home thinking, now I have my department, like they are looking to me, and I could do one of two things. I could just keep doing what we're doing, right? Well, hey, this is what I've been doing for now at the time, 15 years or whatever it was, right? And we're just going to keep doing that. Or I could really take to heart that, hey, this is on me. Like this is part of my mission now. And that's where I really understood the value of like training and what good training could do. Not just check the box, not just siloed. Hey, we're supposed to do this. Let's just, because that's what we always do. But rather impactful, like change, right? Where your officer comes back to you 3 months after they had the class and they go, hey, I did that thing and it worked, right? It wasn't until I was in that role where I truly appreciated the responsibility. And I got the idea, okay, my job is to protect the liability of the city, protect the liability of the agency, to make sure that we're in compliance, even though the state was generally pretty wide open in my particular state. But, there's certain things that we like have to do. I understood that. But then it came down to, but at the end of the day, are my people trained, prepared, and ready to do the job when the moment of truth occurs? Because at that point, we don't get to pick when that moment happens. And when it does happen, the time for training has ended. Right. And so have you done, you training sergeant, you training officer, you instructor, training lieutenant, whatever, have you done everything you could to set them up in the best position? If you do that, the rest of it takes care of itself. The protection of the agency, the protection of the city, the protection of all this other stuff, right, will take care of itself, right? Because you've done everything you could to get them to that point.
Right.
And it wasn't until I really was in that position where I started to truly appreciate. I just wasted 12, 15 years of my career, just thought I was hot stuff, right? And before I realized that there's so much more to this world. And it wasn't, when I became a training sergeant in 2015, 2016 is when I discovered ILEETA, and I went to that conference for the first time, and I'm like, where has this been all my life, right? And then I quickly learned I have to temper my response. Like, okay, here's my 47-page after action report for this 6-day conference and all my 108 step, in order to fix our train. That's like, okay, you need to
go back and boil the ocean, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I was like, oh, I got plans, right? And so I did learn I had to sort of meter my expectations. But that's when I realized that how important that piece is. And then you start to realize how inadequate your current process is to actually get there.
Sure.
And so that's I remember coming across a white paper on utilizing technology to try and do these things that you should be doing in the training sort of piece. And that's where came across Vector Solutions and really started to like, how can I take this piece? Like, how can I take these things? And it's a force multiplier in terms of training management, right? We talked about force multipliers, cameras and drones and
Sure.
all these amazing tools. These are all force multipliers, and 100%, right?
Right.
But there's also force multipliers for instructors and trainings and coordinators and curriculum developers and all these folks that are trying to manage. Did we do all these things, right? It's just impossible to be able to do that without some sort of technology tools. And that's where I discovered, one, technology, and two, began to partner with Vector Solutions. So we developed a relationship with them. Staffing, right? We were on paper, and I am trying to schedule training, and I'm working off of paper copies that turns out to be old copies. So now I'm spending overtime when I should. It's all that stuff where you realize like there's better ways. And so just over time had, like I said, developed a relationship with Vector Solutions, and to the point where they called me and said, hey, we have this job. It's called a solutions engineer. And I said, listen, I haven't engineered anything. So one fourth quarter comeback in high school football, right? And they're like, it's not that kind of engineer. And so it's basically doing what I do out to the masses. And I think that's given me a platform to talk about the thing that I love, which is that law enforcement training, that law enforcement. I always put myself in that shoe of that brand new training sergeant. It says, congratulations, you're now in charge of this. Go. And this guy or gal is sitting there thinking, well, what do I do now?
Well, I just spent the last 12 years not preparing for this moment. What do I do 100%. Now? Yeah. That perspective is so powerful that you have there.
And so that's what I love about the job, is I'm still kind of in the game, and I'm still get to talk to these guys and gals that are in these vital positions that you don't know how vital they are until they're not there, or it's done poorly. Then too often we do it's all okay until it's not okay, right? And then we realize, boy, our training was kind of a soup sandwich. Like, we should probably do something now that we're getting sued. And that's what I'm passionate about, is talking about that. So my role here at Vector Solutions allows me to do that. Allows me to, I remember when I was on the job and I would watch Jim Glennon and Dan Green and Brian Willis and I would watch all these webinars and these trainings. I'm like, those guys are cool. In fact, I got my Jim Glennon book, my signed Jim Glennon book. Like, hey, look, I got my autograph, right? Because I'm like those guys are awesome, right? And then, like I said, went to that conference and I would sat through and I have probably still have the recordings from 10 years ago somewhere, and taking notes. But now this position, this job, if you will, it allows me to dive even deeper. Like, it allows me to really marry the two concepts of training, which is so important, but then that force multiplier of technology to actually get that thing to happen even better. And that's what I value about it. So I was thinking about all of that in when before this talk, and I was thinking, God, I was such a hot mess back in the day, and I wish I could go back to those young 5-year officers and say, hey, listen, be a student of your craft, study this stuff. Like, there's so many amazing writers and instructors, people that are putting out amazing content out there. Don't let it just happen to you. Like, take the bull by the horn and go out, educate yourself. And if you go back to your department and say, hey, I want to do this thing, and they say no, that's okay. Like, do what you can to improve yourself until you are in that position where now you are the training sergeant, or you are that instructor that wants to break down, the siloed. All right, DT guys, you go come up with this, and then okay, guys, firearm guy, you go come up with that, and rather than having like a more cohesive, what I call through point, between all of these things. When you're in that position, then you can do that stuff. But in the meantime, do whatever you can to prepare yourself. I try, and I wish I could go back to that officer back in 1997 and say, listen, kid, there's so much more out there. But now,
at least not alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine how many people out there share our perspective on that, because as it resonated with me as you were telling the story, right? Like you start off your career thinking about you, and then eventually you get responsibility and you suddenly realize, well, it's not just about me anymore. And then you had the agency level experience when you got to that training position. And now with Vector and the role you're in now, you have the entire profession to think about. And
Right.
well, on one hand, there's a tremendous amount of weight to that. There's also a tremendous amount of empowerment and freedom and the ability to go back and connect with that 5-year officer in some way. And so, as I've been excited for this interview because you have a front row seat to some of the best visibility in the profession right now with your role with Vector, because you're seeing where technology and humans meet and interact with each other. And so Frontline, where does Frontline fit into this, and how does that all shape together?
Yeah, so Vector Solutions is the parent company, and we basically have what I call three sort of, on the public sector side. There's also commercial side and education side, but on the public sector side, we generally have what I call like three families of products. Right? You have a CADIS, which many states have, state posts or federal government large academies rely on a CADIS. Many states are, officers in many states are familiar with the CADIS for reporting compliance and things like that, right? Then you have our Target Solutions, right, which is kind of the OG, right? It's been around since 1999 in some form or fashion, and that's what I bought in 2016, when I was a training sergeant. But it's that collection of what have we done, what do we got left to do, who's done what, who hasn't done what, right? And being able to put out your own content or our content, right? And then within that, there's various life skill evaluations plus, which is like our FTO or firearms, something where I'm watching you do something, and then scheduling, time and attendance, as well as equipment management, and then guardian tracking, personnel management, early intervention. So that's kind of that Target Solutions. Well, then in early 2025, very exciting, Vector Solutions acquired Frontline, and which is another family of products with again, very similar sort of experience around training management with a training tracker, but in addition to FTO, FTO tracker, or on the dispatch world, QA tracker, very similar products. So, and then, performance management, policy tracker. So almost just another, I think of it as three-lane freeway. You got a CADIS in the left lane, Target in the middle, Frontline on the right. We're all going the same direction. Sometimes we kind of overlap one lane to the other, but the whole point of it is Vector Solutions is to have the right tool for what you're trying to do at that moment, right? And so now with Frontline joining the family, it's like just that many more arrows in the quiver to like, okay, I know the exact tool that you're trying to get to because I was there, right? I was an FTO sergeant, right? I was an FTO, right? I did the paper DURs and trying to track you down on graveyard, and I'm on day shift. I haven't seen you in 4.5 weeks, right? I've done all that stuff, right? And so here's some tools to maybe help you get there. So that's how the Frontline piece falls into Vector, but it's that family of Vector Solutions supporting public sector, whether we're talking about the feds or 10 officer departments. At the end of the day, we all got to do the same thing. You got certain training you got to do, and I got to somehow record it, deliver it, capture it, report it, whatever the situation is. And that's what Vector Solutions is about.
Awesome. And I love, having that perspective, because obviously the other two I was a little bit more familiar with and kind of the story back, the background on, but this was, Frontline was 2025, you said. And so kind of, getting a better understanding for that. But it does sound like there is a tremendous amount of overlap there between all of them, and a lot of, each vertical has its own lane, as you referred to it, its own role, but there's, the connection between them. And then you also have, like you said, the corporate side and that sort of thing. So resource and reach back for Vector Solutions is phenomenal. And you've got the ability to draw on a wide range of capabilities. And I think that's one of the things that really inspired me about this conversation with you specifically was just kind of watching your webinars and how you do them and who you're getting to talk to. I'm excited to learn a little bit more about what you're seeing. And so I kind of want to, just jump into some of the what are you seeing as far as trends in law enforcement training where technology is accelerating at this crazy pace and everybody wants to talk about everything tech can do. And I'm loving watching like what's happening with, real-time crime and the drone capabilities. And myself specifically, but some of the, my network, we often talk about AI and what it can do for learning purposes, but there's a lot of things AI is doing now as far as real-time data and synthesis of information and things that, my end of the spectrum, we don't get to see. So I want to hear from you. What are you seeing frontline, where you're at front row seat you have trend-wise?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a kind of wild west, right? Of some of the things that are going on out there. And my mind often goes back to the training of it, right? I don't know how many times in your career or my career where we deployed some new technology, some new thing, and we just deploy it, right? And it's almost like an afterthought on how we're going to train it, right? Or how are we going to get this out, right? And I was thinking about the AI report writer. It's kind of technology that's coming out, right? Where it's, and different companies have different tools, but where it's, maybe takes the video from your body-worn camera and it's going to basically write, your report for you. And okay, that sounds partly scary and too interesting, right? But my mind goes back to what's the training around that? Like how are we going to, what's the expectation for officers or deputies or troopers to how they're going to use this? Like what is the policy around that? And what happens if I violate, like how do I get that policy out, right? And so it's all of those things that I also think about, drone as a first responder, amazing like tool, right? To think like, okay, I can, in a matter of a minute, I can have eyes in the sky, see what's going on. Great stuff. Like, what do I need to know about that? Like, how does that affect me on the road? Like, how do I interact with that? How am I going? What's the policy around what can it record, or how do we capture data? The video, and then I'm sitting there thinking about, okay, so for training a scenario, how am I going to incorporate that into that scenario? Like how now that changes the game in terms of, right, what's available to me as that, patrol sergeant who's got a dynamic scene, people running. How am I going to like interact with that, or incorporate that into my training, right? So that's where often my mind goes to when I see these amazing tools out there. But it's often, I think it's too often we just like deploy it because that's what everyone else is doing, and we haven't really thought about like how are we going to connect the pieces, right? And so those are some of the like topics, and I appreciate what you were saying about our webinars. I think that my team and I that I work with, we very intentionally try to keep these, impactful to the industry, right? I'm not really in love with commercial webinars, right? Hey, this is our product. This is and I don't think that guys and gals want to sit there and watch that. I think they, like you said, oh, okay, that's a great idea, right? That's a great, and so we very intentionally, really push to not have that. So I appreciate you saying that, because that's what I want to talk about. Those are the things that, hey, these are great tools. How am I gonna? What do I need to do? Tell my FTOs, because now they have a student officer that now has a report writing issue. How am I going to connect the dots with that? So now I have this tool that's going to write the report for me. What does that mean for this, 21-year-old, right, who may or may not have been to college, right, or have any kind of writing experience, how is that going to affect them? And what, like, do they understand what the importance of writing a clear police report, right? Like that kind of stuff. Those are the things that I think about. So, AI, of course, is a huge topic. And then I think about, Carrie Avery, puts out all kinds of amazing stuff on AI and curriculum development. And then so I think about that stuff as far as, here again, I'm a training sergeant and I need to put together content. And how do I do that? And I'm kind of slowing down. I don't know if you're seeing that on your end.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a lag. I don't know if you can.
Maybe, there we go. Okay.
There we go.
So I think that AI is a great tool for, hey, I want to incorporate this idea into an overall training plan. Help me, like, how can I tie these things through, or what are some of the case law that's going on there? So I think AI is a great tool to help a training sergeant or something kind of draw the big picture, right? To connect the dots within your training program. I really don't like the siloed, right? Like I try to have like this sort of what I call that throughput throughout the year. Like what's the theme that we're trying to get to? And I think now AI is a great tool to help you do that, to help with the curriculum design, to help kind of get that stuff out. So I think that's what I see out there in terms of technology. And then of course, just making it better or easier for me to capture that, or to have line of sight into how my officers are performing and if I need to tweak things, right? So, we talk about have a plan, have a training plan. And where does the ideas for this training plan come from? So often they come from how we did the year before. Like, right. How are we doing our use of forces and they're within law. Yeah, they're within policy, but maybe training, you got to work on training a little bit, right? That's a great resource, but only if you're able to capture that, only if you're able to sort of get the data out and package it in a way that is useful to you. So then helps me tweak things going forward, right? Or like I was saying, the FTO on the field training side, that DUR that's coming in. If you're like me back in 2016, where I'm running through 30 copies of DURs and trying through osmosis collect what's going on, that's not a great way to do that, right? But rather, if I have technology that can give me back some meaningful data on, okay, maybe we need to tweak our delivery here. I'm seeing a theme where we're talking about, I don't know, we seem to keep messing up on high-risk vehicle stops, right? Why do guys rush the car? Well, it's because they see it on the camera, right? Well, that kind of, so maybe we need to tweak how are we delivering this? So that's where having technology to interpret what you have going on so that you can then take some actionable data. And I think that's where AI can really help you do a lot of that stuff. Both, hey, here's the DURs for the last 5 years. Give me, some. Now I can tell you informally the top 3: geography, officer safety, and report writing, right? But AI can say, hey, this is a trend line where maybe we need to really focus our time on this area. Or, hey, AI, let's look at some of the recent case law and that's been released in our state, right? Often we see the federal case laws that are coming out, but maybe there's something in the state or, in the circuit that I need to be aware of that can help me sort of drive, my curriculum. And then how can I use this information to tie in what we're doing here? So that's what I see in technology, is the ability to sort of speed up that process. And then also just the basics of, hey, I need to schedule. I think of some of these agencies, I got 1,500 officers and I have patrol minimum staffing I got to worry about. I got 50 opportunities to take this class. Help me schedule, right? How can I get all 1,500 of these officers in these 50 classes while still being able to maintain minimum staffing on the road, where that would take me a week trial and error, right? If I got it done at all, or
struggle with how it goes. Yeah.
Right. Or if I was smart, I'd go to patrol sergeant. Hey, patrol sergeant, you figure it out and let me know what you come up with. Right. But now having a tool that can help me sort of, keep those things in mind as close as possible. That's where I see technology really starting to take off. In addition to, I'm seeing technology enhancements around online training, which of course we're big in the online training. And I always preach that online training can only get you to a certain point, right? It's a great tool if used correctly. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to teach you handcuffing via online training, right? At some point you got to get handcuffs and practice it, right? But now maybe I can take this video like a base module, and now I can tweak it and add some scenarios based on my real city or a real incident that occurred in my area, or have a real case law in my state that it applies. Those things are traditionally have been difficult for companies like ours to really sort of narrow down to an individual state, because as we know, we don't have one government, we have 52
Right.
governments, right? And so we're having a tool now I can really take this sort of basic piece of content and tweak it to have my policy in there, or my state law, or maybe adjust the hey, these guys in this cartoon, they're dressed in blue, but I'm talking to a couple deputies, so let's change that to a green
Change it.
uniform.
Yeah.
Right? And instead of using the term officer, let's use the term trooper, because we're talking
Yeah.
to state patrol, right? So that's where I'm seeing, because then it makes like you connect with people a little bit, right?
Right.
They don't have to do that so those are some of the technology pieces that I'm coming, but for me, it always comes back to the training side of things. Like, okay, these things are awesome. How is that going to affect the actual people doing the job, and what do I need to do to bridge the gap between that? That's what I think about a lot.
No, I love it. And you pointed out a couple of things in there that I want to pull the thread on. So the one of them being, and I thought it was really cool how you said, I can tell you the top 3 right now, and boom, 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 you rattled them off. There's an element here where at the end of the day, the training sergeant needs to be the expert on training. The patrol sergeant is that expert on leadership. The FTOs, that's their thing. And so is there a risk that you're seeing because you also mentioned technology is speeding things up significantly? Are we running a risk that we need to keep our finger on the pulse of, that technology may outpace human performance? And where do we make sure we stay connected to the human side of the profession?
Yes. Yes. And it's funny because my camera's playing catch up again for a second here. I was just talking to one of the agencies around here, and they recently purchased a virtual reality system. Right? They have the 3-screen sort of platform and all scenarios, and that's great, right? And they bought it last year, right? And I said, hey, how are you using that now? Well, we used it a couple times last year. And I said, okay, it's May. Have you used it this year? No. Well, we haven't figured out how to use it, right? We haven't figured out how to actually be meaningful, so that it's a positive impact to our training, not a negative impact, in that I do my 5 minutes in the simulator, and then I'm waiting 4 hours for the next time, right? I'm just kind of sitting around, and I think those are, sometimes we get these tools and they're great. And I went through it. Like as soon as they bought it, I'm like, well, you got to invite me, because that's my game.
Right here.
And so I got to play with it, and it was cool. But then my question was, how are you going to incorporate this into your training program? We haven't figured that part out yet, right? And so I think that's where we can help in the training world, not necessarily just me here at Vector Solutions, but in that law enforcement training space. Is, okay, now you got this thing and it's cool.
Right.
How do you use it, right? How do you keep it from, if you're doing the same 5 scenarios, right? How do I keep from things getting stale, right? Or how do I how can I maximize its use while we're also doing several other things to kind of keep things flowing, so I'm not wasting people's time, while also not, I got 18 instructors for 6 students because somebody's got to keep running around, or how do I share the wealth that's graveyard at 3:00 in the morning, and the guy that knows how to use the system isn't working, right? But like, that'd be a great time to maybe, even if you just had your range up there, to start practicing because you got a qual coming up.
Right.
Those are the things that I struggled with, and I still see that as a struggle. Is we have these great tools, but what's the best way to maximize the use of it, right? And then going back to like that scenario, the auto report writer, right? I kind of go back. I remember when I first started, right? Probably similar to you, Chevy Caprices and Crown Vics,
Right.
and guess what? Those things didn't drive for you. And then you get on the track today, and the car is so much driving for you but you think you're flipping amazing, right? And you don't realize all the mechanics that are going into it until you go sit in a Crown Vic and try to do what you did, and then guess what? You're in the grass, right? And so I think those tools are awesome tools, but sometimes we got to be careful to not lose the why. Like, why is it important? Like, it's telling me to put in the who, what, why, where, and when, the gram factors. I used force, and what were the circumstances around it, and the kind of, it's telling me to do this, but I don't truly understand why. It's like, what's the purpose of that, right? Why is this important? Because it's like cars today. If that car doesn't have a computer in it, guys are like, I'm not using that car, right? I will find a car, and maybe it doesn't have it. Maybe the tires are low and the one headlight doesn't work, but the computer works, and that's all I care about, right? Because I don't want to have to do all this. So those are the things that I think about. That's a great tool, but do I truly understand why it's important? Why is it important for me to be, from a perspective, telling me what did I see, what did I do based on what I saw and what I know based on my training and experience. The AI is just sort of putting it in there for me, or prompting me to say it in there, but I don't truly understand why this is important. And so sometimes I feel like we lose that, like, that connection. I don't want to say, I fear that we might lose that connection, that everything we do, you and I, Joe, everything we do is built off of the foundation of the police officers and sheriff's deputies that have come before us since 1843, right? And sometimes, though, we make these massive leaps, and I think sometimes we lose, at the end of the day, this is a people business, and I need to be able to read you, like, as a person, and make some decisions on how you're going to act, and then be able to articulate why I did that. If the system's doing it for me, that may be harder for me to sort of make those connections. So those are the things that I worry about. I think they can be overcome, but I think you need to be aware of it, right? You need to be, do you truly understand what the gram factors are and why it's important for you? Because you may not know until this thing gets appealed all the way to the Supreme Court why those things that you put in 4 years ago were important.
You didn't put in. Somebody that AI put in for you, and now you've got to articulate in your own words how that came to be. And I share that concern. And this is one of the things I was really like, I almost knew the conversation was going to go this way, and just kind of watching how you do interviews as well, and the talking to somebody from a tech company. And really, I mean, that's Vector is a tech company,
sure.
But you've kind of positioned this as a people first sort of thing. And as you have these learning conversations, it's about the learner. And so as you were talking about that, I mean, there are so many examples. AI is a great one, but just the moving cover to cover, moving in the shooting space, when we get to a point where we think everything can be done with a headset on, and I could do it comfortably from the seat of my couch, where are we running the risks? And so with that, and you said in there, I think it can be overcome. What do you think, from the seat you're sitting in, it's going to take to make sure that we as humans and leaders in the training space stay ahead of technology so that it doesn't get ahead of us and we don't lose that, 100 plus years of history?
I think that having an honest assessment of what this job entails. What can technology get me to a point? But then understanding there's still more to it, right? And truly appreciating what we need to do. Lon Bartel, awesome guy, right? Friend of mine. I love talking with him on virtual reality type stuff. And we talk about that stuff. Like that's an amazing tool right up until the point where I got to go hands-on with something, right? We're right up until the point where I got to actually grab something or somebody and sort of. So it's a great tool for decision making, right? What am I going to do based on the scenario that I've been giving, right? You can really do all kinds of amazing, what I call choose your own adventure, like paths, right? But at some point, as a trainer, instructor in my agency, I need to realize there's a connection piece, right? There's a piece where I got to leap to the next point. And so often we would do that. Okay, King's X, right? Okay, we'd be doing some sort of takedowns, and we get to the point where we're going to handcuff them. All right, King's X, that's good enough, right? And then we get to we're like, our handcuffing really sucks at this point because we never practice that well, because it's a pain in the butt and it hurts, and the instructor and I get all that stuff, but you have to recognize that's a weak point, right? Or I remember distinctly we would do we had these scenarios, right? And like 2 months, 3 months before, we had done some tactical first aid CPR training, right? And then 3 months later we did it was another training day, and we had a scenario where they were engaged with a target and the person went down. And they are waiting for the King's X. They're just like waiting. Okay, it's all done. They're like, what are you going to do now? What do you mean what I'm going to do? Well, did you remember the training 3 months ago where we had, now, okay, you've used force. Now you own that guy. Now you need to transition, right, to taking some steps, right? And so I think it's having an honest understanding of what is it that I need this person to be able to do? How far can technology get me to that point? But then at some point, we need to take it, there is a point where jujitsu, right? We're doing all these grapplings and that's cool. At some point, I need to actually get the handcuffs on, and then I need to start talking, doing some kind of interviewing. I need to call a supervisor, and then we need to start talking about what happened. There's a next point that I think sometimes we just sort of stop, right? And I think the key is to just be aware of that and make sure that you don't let those things linger. Because I think too often, we just get stuck. Even if it's a real thing and we engage and we do something and then we stop and then everyone looks, okay, now what do we do? And somebody's like, well, we should probably do this because, and so I think the key is to just being aware of that technology is an amazing tool. But at some point, you got to take the headset off and actually, put handcuffs on this person or put a tourniquet on or, do something.
Start the investigation.
To connect the people. Or exactly. That's actually going back to that story I was telling you before. The next piece of that is, okay, you did use force and you did CPR. What do you got to do now? Well, according to this card, you got to call a supervisor. So I'd go find a sergeant that was waiting for his turn or her turn. All right, you're the sergeant. Go, right? And then, of course, they're all looking at me like, this is not what we normally do. Why are you doing this, right? At this point, you should have said King's X 10 minutes ago, right? And because they're waiting, because this is how we've always done it. And I think that's really powerful, where you're getting to the next level. You're pushing it to the next step as much as you can. But in answer to your question, I think it's just being aware that these are great tools, awesome ability to speed things up or to have more visibility in what's going on. But at the end of the day, this is a people business, right? And we need to be able to interact with people all the way through to that job. Our job isn't to just engage in King's X. It's to then, right, to the next step, to the next step, to the next step.
Absolutely. And there's so much to also the ability tech is giving us for throughput and for pre-learning and kind of having folks come in already primed for what's about to happen. And then you mentioned, go get the person who's waiting for their turn. I think we're going to see a time where technology gives us the ability to run scenarios in a headset while someone is over here doing it live. There's plenty that can be done in that space. And I think companies like Vector are a great place to turn for some of those solutions. Like, what could I do with this concurrent training environment that I have, where I've got people sitting in a bleachers waiting for their turn?
100%.
Yeah. So, as we come to the end of our time here together today, I'm going to fire off a couple real quick questions at you, because you said 2016 was a pivotal year for you. That was 10 years ago this year when you took that training position, kind of an eye-opening thing. And now here we are in 2026. I think I look back at 2016 for me and just imagine what didn't exist then that exists now. Where do you see us in 2036? I think the 2030s are going to be one of the most pivotal decades in human history. And where do you see us 10 years from now? What does law enforcement look like, and where are we heading? Heavy question, but I think you might be.
That is a heavy question. I think I am hopeful. I am hopeful that I think people understand technology and where the world's going and AI, but then they really crave human interaction, right? They really appreciate like having those conversations and being able to learn from each other. And I think law enforcement, I am hopeful that we will not go the way of RoboCop, right? Where I have the screen and I'm just sort of communicating through, this sort of processor sort of feel, but rather I think younger officers will understand the importance of human interaction, because maybe they long for it as well. And I think that I am hopeful that the default will be to more human interaction. Yeah, I'm going to have all kinds of amazing tools for like investigative tools. I mean, it's going to be like I'm going to be able to solve a crime faster, find suspects faster, make you whole faster, or and I think that's amazing. But then that's going to allow me to spend more time with you, and that's what I'm hopeful for, that I'm going to be able to. And I realize, I get accused of being a Pollyanna kind of
Me too.
Yep. Right?
Literally that word. And somebody actually made fun of me for using that word, but they're like, is that actually a word? I've been accused of it, and I hear you a little bit doe-eyed about the whole thing. I'm hopeful as well.
And I think we'll keep it'll keep pushing, but at some point it's going to push back. And I think people are like, no, I don't want to talk to an AI report writer robot. I want to talk to a real person that's going to be able to demonstrate empathy, that's going to be able to say, okay, I can appreciate what you're going through, right? Or I had a similar situation, right? I think they're going to want to demand that. And I think the officers are going to want to create it. Yeah, now I have a camera. It's going to help me write these things, and it's going to don't forget this. And so that hopefully, so that I can say, Joe, tell me about what's going on. Like what, tell me more about how does this affect you? What were you thinking? What was the process? How, and so I can make a connection. I'm hopeful of that. The communities are going to demand that. They're not going to want, hey, I don't want to talk to this chat bot and report my, at some point I want to talk to a real live police officer. And I just want them to listen. And hopefully that police department can have all kinds of amazing tools that's going to be able to capture this guy. Great, that's awesome. But at the end of the day, I just want to talk to a person. And so I hope that's where that goes. I don't know. You're right. That's a heady question. I was not prepared for that. I will certainly ask AI.
I don't reload the questions right there, folks.
But when we leave, I'm gonna go to ChatGPT and ask him, what do you think is going to happen in 2036 for law enforcement? But I think I think the technology is going to continue to be, it's going to always be a battle between technology, and then bad guys are going to figure out a way to exploit it until technologies catch up to it. We're going to, I think fraud's going to be amazingly complex, some of these fraud schemes. I mean, I think you're going to need to have computer scientists on your police department to really appreciate what's going on. Similar. I think behavioral health is going to be continue to be something we're going to have to come up with interesting ways to serve our communities, that doesn't involve just arresting our way out of the problem, which almost never solves the problem, right? And so I think we're going to continue. That's going to continue to evolve, but my hope is that we don't lose that human interaction, that human empathy piece, and the tools that we are going to develop allow us to be even more of that human piece when we need to be there. I think that's what I would say to that.
I love it. Thank you. That that was for a spontaneous answer. That was incredibly insightful, and it covered a large range of things, much broader than I thought we might go. And so, quick speed round for you here as we come to the end. Top 1 or 2 skills that trainers absolutely have to maintain and or improve.
Oh, I think communication. You got to be able to connect with these people, right? You got to meet them where they are. So I think communication and adult learning, like how can you get your message across to them? Doesn't matter the topic, right? And you could be the most whiz bang firearms instructor in the world that can do all these amazing things, but if you can't connect with the people that you're trying to instruct, you're going to have a hard time. So I think the communication and understanding how adults learn in different ways and trying to meet them where they are, I think those are probably 2 top things that are at the top of my head.
Awesome. What are you consuming right now? What are you learning about? What's interesting you?
Oh, what I'm focusing on now is trying to understand more about using AI to help me with like the ADDIE model. When I'm trying to develop training, like I just did a webinar with Tom Ovens up from up here in Seattle, and we were talking about the ADDIE model and how I'm kind of developing training. And I think to myself, okay, how can I maximize not necessarily the time, right? Not necessarily about the speed of it, but the impact or the credibility, so that if it does get challenged, like I have a good foundation to build off of, right? As far as case law or things like that. But I'm not an expert in that kind of stuff, right? I'm a law enforcement officer, not a curriculum designer, right? I don't have a master's degree in this kind of stuff. So I think about like, how can I learn to use some of these tools from the perspective of an ignoramus like I was, 15 years ago, right? And so that's what I'm learning now. That's what I'm trying to focus on, is taking these tools in the context of training development and maximize it. So that's kind of my focus these days.
Very cool. No, that's inspiring. The last question I have for you here is, you are one of our members who we're fortunate enough to have with us, who is straddling the line between the law enforcement career in the training space, but you've also ventured into the private sector on the tech end of it and in that area. So answer this question from whatever angle you want, but why ILEETA? Why would somebody either want to be a member, should be a member? Why should training sergeants be encouraging their adjunct instructors, chiefs be encouraging their training officers? Why ILEETA?
If you ever sat in your office and thought, what am I going to train? Or if you've ever sat in your office and thought, where do I start? Or how do I develop this? Where do I go? Like, what is that? There's someone that has done this that can help you, right? But then to have that organized into one collection of folks that have all been in your shoes, right? And Or if you've ever been an instructor, I remember sitting there thinking, firearm instructor, evoc instructor, which by the way, the scariest moments in my career, evoc instructor. Or, all these different types of instructing. And I thought, how I'm just not connecting. Like, what can I do? Like, where is there some technique that I haven't thought of? That's ILEETA, right? It is a collection of people that are in your shoes that have thought the same thing. And as a group, we've come together and say, hey, try this. Imagine all these, imagine, I don't know, like I said, Dale Stockton, right behind you, Travis Yates, whispering in your ear, hey, try this little thing, right? This worked for me back in '87. Or I have, Jim Glennon. It's like, hey, try this tact, right? That's what ILEETA is. Like, hey, like you might want to consider this, or give me a call. I'm here to help you. That's what ILEETA is about. And I didn't really appreciate it until the first time I went. I'm like, oh, this is kind of 6 days. Boy, I'm going to be here forever. And then I get in there and I'm like, my brain is full from all. And you get to the point where I got 4 things and I got 1 class slot. I got to pick something, and you just like, oh, what am I going to do, right? And so that's ILEETA. If you've ever experienced those situations where I'm in this role and I don't know how to handle it, or how can I get my message across, there's someone that's been in your shoes, and that's what ILEETA is for.
Awesome, thank you. And I couldn't agree more. Looks like I may have froze here.
I'm here. I'm still here.
Okay.
I hear you.
You can hear as long as we can hear each other. But yeah. I'm not sure what's going on today. The weather's fine. I'm not sure. Anyway, so whatever it is, Doug Kazensky here with us today. Thank you so much for what you do for the profession, but also just spending the time with us in the Learning Lab. And as soon as, thank you.
I love ILEETA. And I appreciate everything you guys do for, like I said, that poor schlep of a training sergeant. That was me, right? That, I'm like, oh my God, I've learned so many amazing things. It's a great tool. And for all of you training sergeants and officers and instructors and lieutenants out there that are just like have this immense responsibility, thank you for what you do. And we're here to support you. So thank you. Be safe out there.
So just like I said, it was an incredible conversation. I really enjoy talking to Doug and getting to know a little bit more about him and the work he's doing and the entire team at Vector is doing for our profession. And if you're not already following the work they do with their webinars and all of the additional stuff, in addition to all the things we talked about as far as what the silos or the verticals offer within their organization, what they do on the surface, just as a service to the profession, all of the learning, all of the education that's available, and everything they're researching. So stay in touch with them, follow them on social media, follow them on their website, get involved in their webinars, and definitely look for Doug and the rest of the team at the 2027 conference in St. Louis, March 21st through 27th. Actually, it's the 22nd through the 27th, but we're going to be there on Sunday getting ready. So we look forward to seeing you then. Stay in touch with us, and I'll see you on the next webinar. I'm Joe Willis, and thank you so much for tuning in.